Now in Barbara, we are also working in real-time responses of our operating system. That means deterministic responses, which is something that only PLCs, industrial PLCs did in the past. Now we're working also in being able to ensure that the model is going to answer in a specific time frame. So all these are developments that are making the world and the industry evolve really, really, really fast.
Welcome back to the Industrial IoT Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Eric Walenza, the CEO of IoT One, and our guest today is David Puron, CEO of Barbara. The Barbara Industrial Edge Platform provides a fast, secure, and scalable way to automate critical processes using real-time distributed data analysis. In this talk, we discuss the trade-offs between edge and cloud computing for industrial applications and why long-term technology development trends may favor the edge. We explored the evolution of edge computing from M2M communication to AI on the edge. Critical to this evolution has been consistent improvement in the capability of edge chipsets, more efficient algorithms, and techniques for optimizing work packages. We also explored the decision criteria that favor edge computing, namely improved data security, preference for CapEx over OpEx, greatly reduced data transport costs, and the proliferation of low-value data storage on the cloud, which benefits the hyperscalers but not the user. Lastly, we touched on which use cases make sense for edge computing today and which will likely remain on the cloud for the foreseeable future. If you find these conversations valuable, please leave us a comment and a 5-star review. And if you would like to share your company's story or recommend a speaker, you can email us at team@iot1.com. Finally, if you have a research strategy or innovation initiative that you'd like to discuss, please email me directly at erik.walenza@iot1.com. Thank you.
Welcome to the Industrial IoT Spotlight, your number one spot for insight from industrial IoT thought leaders who are transforming businesses today. With your host, Eric Walenza.
David, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, no problem, Eric. I'm very glad to be with you and your audience.
Yeah, I'm glad we found this time to talk. I know our teams have been in touch for a while, and now it's the first time that we're meeting, and I'm looking forward to picking your brain on trends in AI.
Yep, yeah, looking forward to it.
So before we get into the topic at hand, I want to understand a little bit more why you decided to set up the company Barbara. I mean, you have a very strong background in quite mature companies, Telefonica, Huawei, Seven Networks, Silent Circle, Bayshore Networks. And so it's always interesting to me when somebody has a very successful career and then they decide to establish a new company. So why now and why Barbara?
Well, it's been a little bit long history. As you said, I started working for large corporations like Telefonica and Huawei. But then back in 2010, I started to work with some startups. And then we had the NSA revelations. Probably you remember when Edward Snowden. And then I was quite involved with that topic. And then I decided to launch and start my first company there. This was a company called Blackphone, and we were manufacturing secure smartphones. So then I started to work a lot with cybersecurity. And then when we sold Blackphone in 2016, I realized that cybersecurity was also a gap on many other markets like the IoT. I really wanted to apply everything that I learned during my previous work on cybersecurity in smartphones in a really exploding market like the IoT. So it was a kind of natural career for me, but everything trying to cover some market gaps where I think it is important. And for me, cybersecurity has been always an important topic to cover because I think it really affects to how the world is developing. This is why I've been always on this topic, and this is why I started Barbara back in 2017.
Now, Barbara, as it is today at least, extends quite a bit beyond cybersecurity. So you set this up in 2017. At that point, of course, edge computing was quite a bit less mature than it is today. But nonetheless, you have to pick your battles, right? Edge computing could apply to many, pretty much any industry, many different problems. How did you define the scope? Where do you want to play to win here?
Yeah, so we started developing back in 2017 a secure IoT operating system. So we started from this cybersecurity focus. So we developed a cyber secure operating system for IoT devices. But then, as you said, edge computing was starting to be more and more mature. So some of our customers asked us, okay, can you also run some remote workloads on your operating system? And we said yes. So then we became a cyber secure edge computing system. And then all the AI wave has arrived a couple of years ago. And this is something that we will be speaking later for sure. But then we have become in the last 2 years an edge AI management platform. And we are the most secure edge AI management platform that is in the market. So cybersecurity is still on our core of value differentiation, but in terms of value proposition, what we are offering today is an edge management and orchestration tool focused on orchestrating AI models.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so security came first, and then you added AI processing functionality as that particular part of the tech stack matured. And I can see, if I'm looking at the industries that you're focused on, that digital grid, smart water, also smart manufacturing, but certainly those are industries where cybersecurity is critical and determinant, right, in terms of their ability to adopt digital technologies, or maybe a bottleneck, right? If they're not able to guarantee security, they would rather just stay unconnected in many cases. Those are the big industries. I guess manufacturing is the one there that's a bit less well defined. Within manufacturing, are there specific industries where you find that security resonates more with the customer?
Yes. So before we jump into the industries, let's tackle the problem that we are addressing. So as I said, Barbara is an edge management and orchestration tool focused on orchestrating AI models. So this is a little bit complex statement, but for our audience, let's put it very simple. So AI models, the data science as of today, they are very used to work in cloud. Okay, they gather the data, they put it on cloud, they train the models to do predictive analysis, to do whatever AI is capable to do, and they do it in cloud. The problem is that for many industries, like the ones that you were describing, cloud doesn't work. And it doesn't work for many reasons. It doesn't work sometimes because of latency, data latency. They need real-time response of the algorithms and the predictions, and cloud cannot meet this real-time response. Sometimes it's because of scalability and cost. If they are managing huge tons of data, this will be very costly in the cloud. And last but not least, again, privacy and security. Sometimes they don't want their data to be hosted in an environment they don't control, like the cloud. So what we do applies more to those industries where cloud computing doesn't fit perfectly. And these are industries that the common requirement is that they have very distributed assets. So when there are very distributed assets, cloud computing for AI doesn't work. So what are these industries? So as you said, energy, for example, you can think in energy substations. So an energy distributor can have 90 or 100,000 energy substations distributed all over the country. Can you think in connecting all of them to the cloud, doing AI intensive data analysis? No, can be done in the cloud. Also, as you said, water management. You have water treatment plants distributed all over the country. So distributed assets mean cloud doesn't work, and then you need edge computing. And for manufacturing, it's not obviously applicable to any manufacturing segment, but we are more successful in those manufacturing environments with distributed processing. And this is more process manufacturing. So this includes, for example, chemical companies. This includes pharmaceutical companies, and those manufacturing segments where the manufacturing process is more distributed rather than concentrated. Like, for example, automotive manufacturing is relatively concentrated within one factory. But if you talk to process manufacturing, where you have the chemical process in one location, the packaging processes in another location, qualities maybe in another location, then it makes more sense to use edge computing and cybersecurity.
Yeah, and you already listed a few of the reasons why these particular industries are more suitable for edge computing, or why they have requirements that cloud cannot match. Now, edge computing has certain constraints. How do you define what then is feasible within edge computing, and what either cannot be done or then would have to be done on the cloud? And I imagine that you then have interface cloud for certain workloads that need to be done there. But how do you define those boundaries?
Yeah, so normally when it comes to AI, for simplification, we divide the AI process in three big phases. One is the data collection. The second one is the algorithm training, or the model training. And then the third one is the model deployment. Understanding the model deployment as when the model is already running and doing its predictions. So I think edge computing is quite useful for data gathering as well as model deployment. However, it's not that useful for model training because model training normally requires a large computation power, and normally is quite more productive to train the models at the cloud. So the problem of edge computing is normally resources, because these are resources that companies need to pay upfront, and it's not as flexible as cloud. So when you need a lot of resource consumption, like in model training, maybe cloud is better. So normally we work collecting data from factories, helping companies to collect data. Then we send this data to their cloud systems. Then they train the models there. And then using our platform, they can get the model, the trained models, and then they can deploy the models in hundreds or even thousands of gateways of edge computing nodes. So our platform abstracts data scientists from the complexity of integrating with sensors, actuators for data gathering, and also with integrating with hardware for model deployment.
Okay.
But for training, they keep using the cloud normally, although there are some use cases where training is done locally at the edge also.
Are there particular constraints about what types of models you're able to deploy on the edge and what are not feasible because the hardware just can't process them? Or is that typically just a matter of cost, of how much hardware do we want to put in? I mean, I guess to some extent you could do everything on the edge. What defines for you a case study that is feasible to do at scale at a reasonable cost when it comes to deployment of edge computing?
Yeah, there are a couple of sweet spots for us. So the first one is regarding to the type of model that the company wants to use. So there are normally two types of AI. One is the non-real-time AI or batch AI. So these typical models where you run, for example, a prediction every night, right? Taking all the data of the day, like this, financial models and so on. So non-real-time AI, and then the real-time inference AI. So edge computing is more suitable for real-time inference AI. So if you want to take real-time data and do a prediction, like for example, if you want to take a value of a sensor, of a vibration sensor, and decide whether this company is going to break in the next 10 minutes, this is perfect for the edge. Because if you send the data to the cloud and you do all the data cleaning and data time series analysis and everything in the cloud, you will probably get minutes or even hours of delay. But if you do it at the edge, then you will have real time. So edge is more suitable for real time AI rather than batch AI. And then when it comes to technology, there is quite a lot of fragmentation in the AI stacks. So at Barbara, for the moment, we've been focusing on two specific stacks, which is TensorFlow and Keras. But we are also building the compatibility with another three big stacks throughout the year. So our objective by the end of 2024 is being compatible with all the major AI stacks. But that is challenging. And for the moment, we are also a bit limited on technology. So we are compatible with TensorFlow and Keras stacks.
And to stay on this point of what is possible, I think it's an interesting point because the technology is developing very quickly. So, what was possible 2 years ago and what will be possible 2 years in the future is quite different. And so if we look at a simple case, let's say we define a model and we're tracking a temperature variable. And we say when the temperature goes above this threshold, that's probably something that could have been done 2 years ago or 4 years ago pretty effectively. If we are trying to model, let's say, a simulation of a chemical process that has 500 different data points, that becomes much more complex to do on the edge. Where's kind of the threshold of the complexity that can be done today. And then if you can share a bit your thoughts on how quickly is that moving? What is currently can only be done on the cloud that you believe will be able to be migrated to the edge in 1, 2, 3, 5 years, right? What does that roadmap look like?
I think it's complex because the main bottleneck is always the hardware. As long as the hardware allows, in terms of data store and CPU processing or GPU processing, allows to process a number of data points with a complex algorithm, with a complex AI model in time, in milliseconds time, then this can be done. And this depends on both the hardware and the firmware that runs in the edge device. The hardware capacity is growing amazingly. I mean, you have the Jetson Nano, which is a very small device and very powerful device, which was capable of processing large workloads. And then you have now the Jetson Nano Orin or the Jetson Orin Nano. I don't remember the order, but whatever it is, 80 times more powerful than the Jetson Nano at the same price. And we are running their algorithms that are taking 4,000 data points per second and doing predictive algorithm, for example, for a water treatment plant of their chemical process. So it's taking 4,000 data points and it's predicting the amount of chemicals that the customer needs to put on the process. And this is something that I wouldn't say 2 years. I will say that maybe even 1 year ago that was not possible. So this is moving really, really fast. And now in Barbara, we are also working in real-time responses of our operating system. That means deterministic responses, which is something that only PLCs, industrial PLCs did in the past. Now we're working also in being able to ensure that the model is going to answer in a specific time frame. So all these are developments that are making the world and the industry evolve really, really, really fast. So I think probably in 3 to 5 years, we will be able to even train the models on site. And probably cloud will be at the end very suitable for specific industries like media or financial, where you have like huge worldwide regional dispersion. But for industrial use cases and so on, I think almost everything will be able to be done on premise and without the cloud. So I think the edge is going to be moved fast. And yeah, we can see a lot of predictions that speaks about cloud repatriation and many things that is making the edge to gain more and more market. So I'm sure that in 3 to 5 years, edge computing will be probably over 50% of all the AI use cases for the industry.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So if we compare cloud versus edge, I guess traditionally the key constraint was just the ability to process on the edge, and that constraint is being reduced as the hardware and firmware evolves. I guess then you move into security versus cost structure, and then also there's a performance element. And so your assumption is that I would assume that the cost structure in the longer term would still favor the cloud to some extent, but maybe performance and security would favor edge. Or do you see also the cost structure of edge computing reaching parity with cloud computing if we look out 5 or more years?
I don't know what the hyperscalers will do, but the reality is that as of today, I heard, for example, a statistic the other day that says in the UK, more than 20% of the companies have already moved half of their workloads to the edge. And the top reason is cost. So 43% of those companies are moving to the edge because of cost, and 33% of those companies are moving because of privacy and security constraints. So these 43% of companies that have already moved half of their workloads to the edge are receiving like really, really big invoices from the hyperscalers in the cloud. So I think cloud made a promise 10 years ago about many things, but they didn't make any promise about the cost. And if you are processing large workloads on the cloud, like for example, the one that I was telling you about using 4,000 data points, is unmanageable. And with Edge, the hardware, first of all, is quite cheap. It's becoming very cheap. And also it's CapEx. I mean, it's a one-time investment, and then it lasts all your life. And also the OpEx with companies and products like Barbara, where you can operate this complex deployment from a very simple tool, centralized, with a very simple UX, and UI, the total cost of operation is also becoming less and less expensive. So I don't think cloud can compete in the future with edge in cost. I think it can compete definitely when you have like really, really large worldwide deployments. Like let's take, for example, Netflix, or Netflix will never go to thin edge, right? So it will go to large data centers and so on. But again, for industrial companies, I think edge has a lot to say versus cloud. And this includes also cost savings.
Okay, interesting. And I guess the cost of connectivity, well, it also converts to capex, but then also, anyways, you have to pay for capex if you want to have connectivity to the cloud. So there's going to be a direct cost reduction there.
If you're still listening, then you must take technology seriously. So I'd like to introduce you to our case study database. Think of it as a roadmap that can help you understand which use cases and technologies are being deployed in the world today. We have cataloged more than 9,000 case studies and are adding 500 per month with detailed tagging by industry and function. Our goal is to help you make better investment decisions that are backed by data. Check it out at the link below, and please share your thoughts. We'd love to hear how we can improve it. Thank you, and back to the show.
So there's also been a lot of progress recently, or at least I guess you could argue about how much progress, but in terms of the connectivity solutions on the edge that enable more wireless environments, which I think has also been a constraint in some circumstances. And so I know maybe this is a little bit adjacent to your core product, but how impactful is that on enabling use cases? Is, for example, 5G enabling the higher bandwidth at the edge, or some of the just lighter solutions? Do they really have a significant impact on customers' ability to adopt your solutions, or are those a bit more tangential and less important in the decision?
I will say for the industrial customers, I wouldn't say that 5G has yet become like a key driver. I think it definitely needs a little bit more of a development. I think the 5G promises, including the ultra-low latency and some others, are still to be consolidated in the industry. And this is something that always happened with the cellular network releases. I think you had the 2G and then the 3G, which were kind of standards that didn't have like a really, really good performance. And then you have 4G, which perfect, right? And then now you have 5G, but 5G still has some interoperability challenges between vendors and so on. And I think the promises that 5G, in many terms, at least from what we see, hasn't arrived yet to the real market and to the field. I think we are very looking forward into the 6G. However, there are some other developments that had an impact, like, for example, LoRa. I think we had these non-regulated network standards like LoRa or Sigfox. Sigfox, unfortunately, I think is becoming less and less popular, but for example, LoRa is a wireless connectivity standard that is being used in many factories, in many agriculture fields, and this is something that we support, and is enabling us a lot of use cases. And many industrial customers are yet going through wired environments using Ethernet cables. So, but wireless, in terms of wireless, I will put more LoRa and the short range networks on a more impactful stage than 5G. I think 5G will eventually let the space to 6G, and probably that will be the release that will have more traction.
Yeah, that's what we've found as well. We did a study with Siemens on this a while back, and we're trying to find the use cases that 5G really unlocked. And it was challenging because the use cases they're just use cases that people are not really using that much anyways, right? Things like augmented reality on the shop floor or something that anyways has such a low adoption. It's basically maybe not a gimmick, but it's very niche.
But the reason why they are not adopting is not because the use case doesn't make sense. It does. But the reality is that the network can't make its promise yet. So I think everybody talks, for example, real-time surgeries, right? So the doctor operating a patient where the patient is in Asia and the doctor is in Europe. So that is great. I mean, why not? But this is very, very critical obviously, and network cannot fail. And network, if it says 100 millisecond delay, it needs to be 100 millisecond delay. And there are a lot of things like network slicing and network quality of service, which in the paper and in the standards look very good. But when you need to achieve interoperability between devices, vendors, and in large roaming networks, it's not working. So use cases make sense. However, technology, I think, is not yet there, despite what the standards say. I mean, the real world is very different.
And coming back to the hardware topic, on your website for your enterprise edition, you have here access to custom firmware and hardware. Well, what does that look like? Is this a custom solution you developed, or are you working individually with each enterprise to customize based on their requirements?
So our product is divided into layers. So the above layer is our management platform. So the management platform is the one that allows you to orchestrate and manage the devices, the models, the data applications that are distributed on the devices. The second part of the product is the firmware that goes in the device. The firmware that goes in the device provides you the ability to be orchestrated, obviously, and also provides you a layer of security. That firmware is compatible with a number of devices and architectures. So it's compatible with Intel, ARM, and some other big names, right? And that firmware is, with our business license, we sell a firmware which is standard. With our enterprise license, we allow the customers to customize that firmware. And we can customize that firmware for a large enterprise with their models, with their network configuration, with their proxy configuration, with whatever is needed so that they can put this firmware on the factory of their devices or their operations. But the installation and deployment time is shortened to minutes. While if you don't have a customized firmware, then you need to deploy and then you need to customize. It's more subject to mistakes. So this is why for large enterprises with lots of devices, like thousands of devices, we always require to have your own firmware customized, because this will help you to have less mistakes on the provisioning process and ensure that you can provision new devices very, very quickly because the firmware is already customized with what you need.
Yeah.
This is what we refer by customization. But in terms of hardware support, we support, I will say, most of the edge computing nodes that are out there, which are based in Intel or ARM. And we also have, by the way, a virtual firmware. So we can also, if the customer has a virtual machine server on their premises, we can also put our firmware there and then they can do the AI management and orchestration on a virtual device. They don't 100% require hardware.
I guess one other way of looking at that two-tier is that the business, so let's say the lower tier, could also be suitable for running pilots or validating a solution, and then you do the custom work. I'm curious, I know companies have quite different perspectives on the value of a pilot project, right? Does it actually validate? Does it maybe give you the illusion of something, but that doesn't necessarily scale? What's your philosophy there? Do you find pilots to be highly effective in predicting success or not so?
We try to differentiate with the customers when they are speaking about a trial and when they are speaking about a pilot. A trial is if you want to try the tool on your desktop, on your table, with an edge computing node that is sitting next to you. That is not useful at all. I mean, the problems arrive when you take this device and you put it on the field. And then you get into the factory and then you realize that the data that you were supposed to gather, you are not gathering because there is a firewall in the middle. And then the OT people tells you that they cannot open this firewall. And so this is a pilot. So if the pilot is done in a real environment, and you can call it pilot, but at the end of the day, it's a small deployment, then it is useful. So for trials, if the customers want to try our product, this is fine, but this won't ensure you that this will be useful on the field. If you want to ensure this is useful on the field, take this edge computing node to a factory, to an electric substation, and then run your models there. This is something that can take 1 or 2 months. I mean, it's not very long, but if you do it and this is successful, this will ensure you your return of investment and everything. And I will say that over 75% of the pilots we do, speaking about this type of pilots, end up in a large production environment. But we are not speaking about trials. Trials is a different thing. But if you take our technology with your models to the field, 75% of the times, this will end up in a real use case with large deployment with a lot of return of investment. But you need to do the pilot on the field. If not, and it's not useful at all.
Gotcha. Yeah, good point. So a pilot needs to be a proper deployment in order to actually be helpful. You mentioned a time of maybe 1 or 2 months. I guess a lot of that time is collecting the data and processing the data and assessing the results. What would be the workload involved? If somebody says, I have a concept, I want to validate this. I mean, you don't necessarily have to share pricing here, but what would be the workload involved in terms of man hours, in terms of maybe give us a kind of a rough cost range for somebody to actually go through that 1 to 2 month process?
Yeah, so it obviously depends on how mature they are on the process. So there are companies which they already have the data, they already have the model, they have already even trained the model. And the problem they are facing is that they cannot run this model in the cloud because for example, they cannot connect their plans to the cloud, and then they are looking into deploy this model at the edge. If they have the model, they have the data and everything ready, and the problem they want to tackle is just that they want to deploy this application or this model to the edge, we're talking about 1 or 2 weeks time of one engineer. So it's very short. It's very short. If the company is less mature and they need to take data from a sensor or a few sensors or a database or an SCADA, and then they have to train the model and develop the model, fine-tune the model, this is when I said it's maybe a 2 months time involving maybe 1 or 2 persons. But we at Barbara, we have focused a lot on usability and user experience. So our tool is really simple to use, very intuitive with 1 or 2 clicks for making many of the things that they have to do. And compared with some other tools where you have this command line interface, very complex integration with code repositories and very complex things, compared with other tools, I think Barbara can take the models to production 3 or 4 times faster. So with some other edge AI computing tools, it can take you 6 to 8 months. With Barbara, is 1 or 2 months using 1 or 2 people. And we have always a customer success team helping 24/7 to those customers to make their story success.
David, let me ask one final question here. And this is something I'm kind of feeding into every podcast this year. This is the year of the LLM. And that's a completely different type of data. But what I hear from our customers is that they're very hesitant to move a lot of their data to the cloud. So that could be, this is now dealing with PDFs and other kind of data that typically would not be a factor in edge computing. But are you seeing customers using edge computing to process these types of solutions in their facilities to avoid migrating to the cloud? How do you see that?
No, I think if you see the edge, I will differentiate between thin edge and thick edge, or maybe device edge and data center edge. I think LLMs and large model processing is done more on the data center edge. I mean, you can say it is edge computing because it's not a hyperscaler, is your rack on a data center, but it's close to edge computing. So when people say they don't want to move the data for LLMs to the cloud, they are moving it to another data center, which is their own. But when we refer to edge computing, we are speaking more about device edge computing. We are not seeing customers processing LLMs on that type of edge computing. But having said this, obviously LLMs is going to be a huge market, but it's more related to server or data center edge computing, which is something that Barbara is not involved to. Barbara is more involved on predictive analysis of industrial data on real time. That is.
Yeah, got it. Great. Well, David, I think you've given us a good overview of where we are with edge computing today. Anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to share with folks, or any last thoughts?
No, I've enjoyed a lot the conversation. I hope our audience also do. And I offer our time and our resources to help anybody who wants to deep dive on use cases and the technology. I think we need to build the edge computing world together.
Yeah, great. And for the folks listening, the website is barbara.tech. Is the best way for folks to reach out just to contact you via the website? Any other approach that you'd suggest?
Yes, we do have a chatbot, a little bit AI, but there's also humans behind that chatbot. entering in barbara.tech and using the chatbot, you will get an immediate response from our team.
Wonderful. David, thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Industrial IoT Spotlight. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at IoT1HQ and to check out our database of case studies on IoT1.com. If you have unique insight or a project deployment story to share, we'd love to feature you on a future edition. Write us at eric.walenza@iot1.com.